This is Creepy and Geeky, a part of the Morbidly Beautiful Podcast Network. Welcome to Creepy and Geeky. I'm your host, Robert, and on today's episode, we're talking about the Fear Street Trilogy. Joining me today is Bel Morrigan, the host of the Fishnets and Philosophy podcast. Welcome back to the show, Bel.
Hi, Robert. Thanks for having me back on. I'm looking forward
Yeah.
to chatting all things Fear Street.
Yeah. No, this will be an interesting conversation because I have no past association with R.L. Stein or anything like that. So because I grew up in the 80s before R.L. Stein and Goosebumps and all that came about. So
Huh.
I think the only person that we had kind of in the 80s was maybe Christopher Pike and maybe Lois Duncan. But I didn't even read those. Um so it's a little it's funny to look at a few of these things. But I think Fear Street is fairly good. These movies, I associate R.L. Stein and stuff like that with being more preteen to teen era
Mm.
stuff. And I could be wrong. So because these Fear Street movies definitely did not seem to be, they seem to be teen, but like older teen. Uh,
Oh
so
yeah, and well, I think that was always the different like with R.L. Stein, like his books and stuff like that. Like Goosebumps was always kind of geared towards, kind of that kind of like weird kind of like age gap between like kind of just when you're at that like preteen cusp when you're kind of just
right,
leaving childhood, you're entering teenage years, but you're still younger. And whereas the Fear Street, even though I've never actually read any of the books, but I know from they were always like geared towards more YA, so young adult, like older teenagers, like
right,
so there'd be more complex themes and dealing with like I guess more gory type of situations and stuff like that. But I like I grew up with the Goosebumps TV series, and I remember reading Goosebumps as well when I was a kid as well. So seeing more R.L. Stein properties being made into either films or shows is just really exciting anyway.
right. Yeah, I'm looking at this. Goosebumps was started in 92 and Fear Street itself was started in 89. So I should have been like, because I was 15 in 89. So let's see. Yeah, it's so I should have been kind of right there, but I think by that point I was already reading Stephen King, and so I had
Yeah.
already been like I was already beyond Fear Street, I guess, in kind of in my mind. I don't know. I just never encountered it. I don't think I never ran into it. And a lot of my so I didn't grow up loving horror, like horror
Hmm.
movies and stuff like that. I liked it. I watched horror movies and stuff like that, but I've always been more of a comic book person.
Yeah.
And so that's where my my major things went. But during middle school and high school, I did study, like I would read a lot of books on like more non-fictional books about the supernatural and
Hmm.
UFOs and all that stuff that was, real interesting during that time period. And so I read all the non-fictional stuff about it. And then when I did decide to read fiction stuff, I immediately went to Stephen King and kind of jumped over all that other stuff. Um, so it's interesting to kind of come back to it a little bit and get a little bit of experience. Not much, but again, with this Fear Street trilogy, um, it gives me a little taste of what there was.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. And I can kind of understand that as well when you were saying that around the age that you would have been when these kind of, I guess, the books would have been targeted at, you were obviously like, as you said, felt beyond that. And I think that's something that a lot of kind of it's funny, like teenagers in general do. It's like things that are kind of geared actually towards you. You kind of go, no, this is like, this is dumb. This isn't for me. I'm ready for adult stuff. And you seek out stuff that is like for more mature audiences because you kind of are a teenager and believe you're mature. So it's interesting when you
Right.
said, when we cycle back to these things and kind of go, oh, I actually kind of could have appreciated this. I just, if I had have actually engaged with it at the time.
Right. But I was like, so it should have appealed to me. I don't think I ever encountered it. That was the major thing, is just that I don't remember these books being around. And so I think that was the thing. And most likely because I didn't seek out horror stories in
Mm-hmm.
that way. And I went straight to the master of horror himself at that
Yeah.
point. And so it's a little funny, but all that being said, I really like these movies. I enjoyed them the first time I watched them. This is only the second time I watched them, rewatching them for this episode, and I really enjoyed them for the most part. We'll get into it, but my favorite of these, and I'll just lay it out real quick at the beginning, is my favorite is the first one, 1994.
Mm.
That one, that one, I when I first watched them, I said I like 1666 more, but I think that was because half of it's actually set in 94. So it's like 1994 part two. So, and it actually says that when it switches back to 1994. So it was funny. So, but yeah, what are your thoughts on the trilogy as a whole?
Yeah, no, I have a great time with them. Like, but yeah, no, I'm a big fan of the I guess the trilogy is an entire piece of like the three of them. I definitely would prefer parts one and two as like standalone individual films. And in general, because like the trilogy itself is like, Netflix properties, they've become like comfort rewatches for me. Like sometimes if I'm just looking to watch something but I don't want to put something new on because like you don't know if it's worth investing the time or whatever, I'll just throw on either 1994 or 1978. I'll throw like either of them because
Right.
they're just both good fun, and it just depends on the vibe I'm in seeking out. But yeah, no, I enjoy it overall, and I'm just like, it was such a clever concept to like drop an entire film of a trilogy one a week, and I'm just like, why Netflix hasn't done it again? Like it would just, it's a sure thing. People would tune in for it for sure.
Right. No, I agree. I think 94 and 78 are the two highlights of them all. I don't think 1666 is bad, um, but I don't vibe with it as well as the other two eras. Um, and it's but the whole series as a whole is a lot of fun. I think I watched it. I don't think I watched it the week by week when it came out, although that is a good formula for them. I think Netflix and I think Amazon are the only ones who kind of drop everything at once anymore. I think everybody else is just doing the week by week thing again.
Yeah,
And I think that actually works better in a lot of ways.
I think it
For
depends. Like,
Yeah, no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, I think it really depends. Like for example, I was talking with a friend the other day. Like we were just talking about like rewatching shows that we were fans of or whatever. And she was saying that she started rewatching Orange Is the New Black, and saying she was saying though that like she could barely, like it was almost like watching it brand new because she could barely remember it because the way Netflix does with all their shows is they drop everything at once, and the same with Prime, and you kind of watch it all over the course of like a day or two,
Right.
and that means you receive it, it goes in, but after a while, like most of it is gonna kind of just leave your brain. Whereas, like I've started rewatching like the Lost TV series, and I'm watching it, and I'm just like, remembering what's happened, because that was a show that you watched week by week, and it meant
Hmm.
that you had an entire week to kind of reflect on what happened in the episode, and then there was also the talking about it with other people. So I think
Yeah.
it depends, but with this Fear Street trilogy of a film, one a week, I think that is such a clever concept. And honestly, like if they just did that every October, a different Fear Street trilogy of horror films, it would be such a cool idea.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that I know it when it came out, it was huge. Everybody online was talking about the series. And even I was just like, okay, well, I'm gonna watch these. I don't think I watched them until after the all three came out, but I was pretty excited to see them just because everybody was talking about them and I had watched the trailers for it and it looked good. And I'm surprised. It like it's actually like while they use a lot of well-worn tropes in slasher movies, they do it well. And that's I people talk all the time about slasher movies and how they're nothing's original and everything. And that's fine. I don't care if something's original as long as what you're doing with it is fun and interesting. I don't need it all to reinvent the wheel every time. I don't need a new scream every week. I just want something that's fun and enjoyable. Um and and
100%.
and these movies did that. They were fun. They had great soundtracks.
Oh,
And you
yes.
know and that's a big one, for each one of these, 1666 notwithstanding.
Yeah.
But the 90s stuff and the 70s stuff, just they were really smart in getting really good music and pairing it well with the episodes as a whole to create that atmosphere of what you're watching. That way you never felt like you were out of like touch of that time.
100%. Like I'm just that's one of the things that was definitely a highlight of, again, those first two films for me. It's just like the needle drops, like, and
Yeah.
banger after banger, just like so like no, definitely like in 94, like I think like the first like opening like 10-15 minutes of the film feels like it's just needle drop after needle drop after needle drop.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of just like the film is just like, look, we were able to get all these big 90s hits, we're just going to use them all right now.
But we're
And
only going to use them for like 30 seconds each, though. That was what was
exactly.
funny, was like it was like needle drop after needle drop, but it was like just a little bit of each song. And no, it was great though. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, 100%. And I think like you were saying earlier, that these films, like, when they came out, like they were everyone was talking about at the time. I definitely think it helped that these films dropped, during the height of obviously like the COVID lockdowns that were
Yeah.
affecting the world. So like, everyone was at home and watching the streamers. Like that's, what the only things people could do. So it
Right.
kind of they landed at the right time. Like I'm wondering if we either like had have never went through the lockdowns, or even just now, like in this kind of post lockdown world, if like they had dropped just like on Netflix now, would there have been much fanfare? I don't know. So I think the films definitely benefited from the time like that they dropped and were released. But even at that though, they're just really well made, and I think the reason why a certain generation of horror fans really enjoyed particularly part one is because the songs are like the songs of so much of our youth. So it's
Right.
kind of just like, hey, I remember these when I would have been a teenager, or stuff like that. So yeah, it was just like really, really well thought out, I think.
Yeah, and I think, having the episode in 1994, like the first movie set in 1994, really plays to that generation of kids who came up at that time, like the kids who
Mm-hmm.
would have been reading it at that time. And so that was like the perfect entry level of let's get all the old fans of Fear Street and let's just, get all these music, all these songs and these needle drops and everything, and then you know do it that way, and it works. I mean, even for me, being a kid of the 80s, I was still, I was a young adult in the in the 90s, so it still
Hmm.
worked well for me. And then of course the 70s one works well for me because it's, it was 78, so it was like, you had a lot of 70s music to, pick from.
Yeah.
And a lot of that was music my parents listened to, so it was a lot of good stuff like that. So it was just those two episodes just work so well together.
100%. And like, I think, that's why they're the ones I've rewatched the most. As
Yeah.
in, for this podcast discussion, like, I rewatched the entire trilogy yesterday. And like, I've seen parts one and two, like, now probably like a few times because I just throw them on every now and then because they're
Right.
just good fun. But like, this was actually my first time rewatching part three since the first time it came out
Okay.
because it's just the accents. I just
Yeah.
can't deal with the accents because one, they're all terrible. Like none of them are good. Like they're absolutely all shockingly awful. And I'm just like, it's just one of those things that it's just as an Irish person, I'm just like, whenever I'm watching a film, I'm like, if you want Irish accents in a film, just hire fucking Irish actors because there's plenty of them around and you'll get a more authentic accent. But also the thing that kind of really kind of grinded my gears about that, just from like an historical, I guess, perspective, is that, there would have been no Irish in America at that time. Like
Right.
the pilgrims, which is what this is, like a settlement of like pilgrims, weren't Irish. There was no Irish there. We were not part of
Right.
it. So it's just one, the accents are shite, but then also it just doesn't make historical sense. And I was just, so I'm spending like the first half of that film just angry. And then it goes back to 1994 again, and then it picks up and it like gets better. But it's just that first half of the film, I'm just like watching it through anger. I can't turn it off. I'm just like,
Right.
no, this is awful.
Yeah, no, the accents are bad. Like I get why they didn't hire real Irish people because they were having them being played by the actors who were in the 90s,
Yeah.
94 and 78 installments. Makes sense. But it's it's I don't know. The it For me 1666 just drags more than anything. It's not as interesting because I think you didn't really need to tell the story of Sarah Fear in that depth. Um, I think you could have gotten away with it more by exposition. Just somebody finding like maybe a diary of hers or something like that, and finding, just kind of reading the history of it would have maybe been more interesting to me, than watching them kind of reenact it. Um,
Yeah, I guess like I suppose it's like it's a tricky one because like I do think like the reason I think it does drag as well is because obviously, it's they're trying to do a mini kind of like, folk horror film
yeah, a little version of
in
the witch.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly, basically. And like, folk horror in general is like such a difficult mood to pull off. And I kind of think it just they don't really do it that well. So it just kind of sticks out like a sore thumb. But I do like that they wanted to kind of give like Sarah's story, Sarah Fear, the character, they
yeah,
wanted to give that character's story the time it deserved. Because at the end of the day, when you
right,
realize that the entire trilogy is actually like the twist is that it's actually kind of like almost a good for her kind of feminist
yeah.
story. I think if they had have just told it through like an exposition type way, it might have
Lost a little something. Yeah,
lost a little of the impact, I think. So yeah, even though I do find that first half difficult to sit through because of the accents, and it just they don't really capture the folk horror mood that well. I
right,
still think getting to see Sarah's story played out through her words is a good decision, even if
right,
as a whole, part three is probably the weaker of the trilogy.
right. I think once it transitions back to 94, obviously it gets better. And it's fine. I'm not hating on the 1666. I think it's fine. I just there's something that could have been done to maybe make it a little bit better. But I do
Yeah.
agree with you. I'm very happy that they show you that and show you that, give you that twist that Sarah Fear wasn't, ultimately, we're jumping way ahead on this,
Yeah.
and spoilers for everybody. But she's not the villain of the piece. She's fighting back against those who hurt her and destroyed her. And it's it's I enjoy that aspect of it for sure, and I'm glad it comes around at the end. And you know it would be interesting to see maybe a follow-up movie based in Fear Street, like after the events of this,
Mm.
just to see where things went. Did they really get better, or is there something more
Well, it
problematic?
definitely, like
So
again, jumping well ahead,
yeah.
the end of part 3, like, and as like the credits kind of start rolling, it zooms
Oh
in
yeah, yeah,
and
you're right.
it shows the her or like that kind of satanic Bible book, whatever you want to call it, being
Being
picked
grabbed
up
by
by
somebody.
someone. So
Yeah,
there's definitely potential for there to be more. So yeah, I'd be
yeah.
interested to see it. But yeah, like the films, I'm a big fan of them. So yeah, you jump in, ask which questions you want on each part.
Well, let's go ahead and we'll backtrack now. We'll get back to 1994.
Mhm.
So 1994 is it's I do like uh I like pretty much everything about this one. It's real fun. We get the main characters, and now I can't remember anybody's names like usual. Um
Yes, it will be something that I'll have to get up because yeah, I only like Sam is the girlfriend that and the one
yeah,
that is has moved to Shady Vale.
yeah.
Or
Dina.
no, Dean is the main one. Yes, that's it.
Dina's the main character, and she's broken up with somebody named Sam, who we find out pretty quickly was, well, there's a little bait and switch there. You think it's a football player, but then turns out to be the cheerleader who's with the football player. And so, so now we've got this nice uh uh lesbian subplot of our main plot of this romance that's kind of had an issue because Sam moved to Sunnyvale away from Shady Side. So
Yes, I combined the two of them by mistake by saying Shady Vale. That's a completely different town. That like maybe that's like going to be
the
explored in a
combined
different. Yeah,
is the
exactly.
yeah. It'd probably be better if they didn't call it Shadyvale. Maybe more Sunnyside would probably be the best way to combine the town
True.
names.
I think so. Shady Vale is very much like the 100% horror. Nothing good happens there.
Right. So, it's kind of hard. It's the usual teenage stuff. They have their breakup, but they didn't really want to break up. And but the boyfriend, the new boyfriend of Sam, is trying to retaliate or whatever. I don't even, like, I'm misremembering things now, but they're chasing them on the bus. There's an accident, and they suddenly get embroiled into the whole Sarah Fear stuff.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm
so
completely skipping. Oh my god, I'm completely skipping the cold open, which is like really good.
yes, oh, I love, and we
I
also have
forgot about the
our,
mall opening.
I know the mall, like, and then also we've got our fantastic Maya Hawk,
Maya
in
Hawk
it,
from Stranger
who's
Things.
exactly from Stranger Things and from Do Revenge, and
Yes, I still
yes,
need
like
to see that.
I'd recommend it. It's good fun. Like
Yeah,
it is what it is. But I'd recommend it for a good watch, a
yeah,
good easy watch. But yeah, no, we've got as I said, the cold open, and I think it's executed really well, and it kind of
yeah.
you know
It's there's a nice homage to the first Scream movie as well,
yes,
in it. So
definitely.
it's definitely, she's being chased by somebody in a um like a skeleton costume, with a skull mask, and she's being terrorized by him, and you find out as she's being killed that it's her friend, um who works
Yes.
in the mall with her.
exactly, because like she was finishing her shift and he kind of her friend appears and like he's holding this random like inflatable sex doll and he
Yeah,
just like there's that weird scene where he just makes some jokes about the doll and then he says he just has to go close off his shop and then he'll be out to walk her home or whatever, and that's as he said then it appears and she gets stalked by this killer and it's a really kind of well done cat and mouse scene that she kind of gets chased
right.
around the mall and then yeah she gets killed and it turns out that it was him, but it's when she pulls off the mask like you kind of see this kind of weird kind of vacant expression in his eyes
Yeah, very
look
vacant expression.
that looks like he I don't know wasn't really himself and then he gets shot by which turns out to be Sheriff Good.
Yes. So he gets shot and killed by Sheriff Good. And so I don't really want to recap all these.
Yes.
But I definitely want to like point out stuff, and that's why I wanted to go back and point it out. Like, I've got no problem with you recapping. I just was like, I don't want to get into a trap of doing it because then it just makes things really long and
Oh
everything.
yeah,
So,
and
but
there's a
anyway,
lot.
yeah, there is a lot with all three movies. But anyway, but yeah, so we just so it switches over to now Dina and the whole Dina and Sam stuff. Um, and that is the crux of the whole storyline is this whole Dina and Sam thing kind of is a
Hmm.
through line through everything. And so they obviously they hear about the murder at the mall, and um you know everybody's bringing up Sarah Fear again, and it's her brother, Dina's brother, is a big um I wouldn't say fan, but he's studies all this stuff about Sarah Fear and has studied all um the history and lore of it all and knows all about the different killers, the shady side killers throughout all the years and everything. And so you see this pattern of killers every you I don't know, it looks like
It's every
between 12
16
to 15
years.
years. Yeah.
I think it's exactly every 16 years there's been a different killer that
Okay.
the
All right.
theory is possessed by Sarah Fear. And also, I just love how the brother Josh is basically like, he's the Randy of this
Yes.
franchise.
Yeah.
Like, and I think in general, every slasher tends to, after like, Scream chain, as I said, did actually turn the wheel in many ways. Since then, so many like teen slashers always has the one kind of nerdy kid that's the kid that knows everything, and that's what Josh is in this film, and I think he does the role well. I like Josh. He's a little lovable nerd.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, I was that kind of nerdy guy who knew a lot about comic books, and like I said, I've studied a lot of supernatural stuff and everything. So I was kind of like the guy who knew a lot about that random crap too. So it was just like, so I would have fit right in with that. But yeah, so he's got all the lore and the history in his back pocket, and which will come handy later, for sure. And then we meet Dina's friends, one's the valedictorian and one's her. It's not really said. He seems like the boyfriend at first, but may just be a friend. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's kind of not clear what role he is with her friend. And now I'm forgetting her name too.
yeah, no, so her friend is Kate, and then her kind
Yes,
of, I
Kate.
guess, uh, her part two is
Yeah,
Simon. Like, yeah,
Simon,
so
right?
Kate and
Kate and
Simon
Simon.
seem to be this like duo. But yeah, I don't think they're necessarily a relationship.
No, I
And I
think
don't
they're
think
just
they
really
ever
good
were.
friends.
They're
Yeah.
just good friends, and they're obviously somewhat both involved with the drug trade in school.
Yes. Yeah. So, and then, and Simon definitely, on the outward, seems to be the kind of guy who would be involved in that. Whereas Kate is like I said, the
Yeah,
valedictorian and the good girl and stuff like that. But she's using it to, get money so that she can, go to college and everything. And so, it plays on, it kind of spins those tropes a little bit, which is nice. So a lot of this is, you know like I said before, that these movies play into the tropes, but do it in different and good ways.
Hmm.
So you've got the bad kids and stuff like that, but it's really the valedictorian, and it's nice to see them kind of change that up and to show that. And you see it in other movies as well too, where sometimes the bad kid is actually the one you would least suspect as being the bad one, because they are the valedictorian or the good student, or just normally outwardly seem to be a good person. um so it's fun to have that portrayal in here, because Dina seems to be more of the, like, in most other things, she seems to be the one who isn't doing all the bad stuff. She just has the friends who are doing the bad stuff.
Yeah, like I think, and also as well, like she does come across as the more like just from her
More
character,
responsible.
like well, from her like as a character, Dina does seem to be the more kind of like rebellious type person, and it's why it's funny to kind of subvert it that she isn't actually involved with any of these quote
Right.
unquote underhanded activities. But like I do like how the film, like even though Kate and Simon are kind of obviously involved with like selling drugs in school. I like how the film doesn't really moralize about it either. It kind of just
Right.
says that they're just doing it. Like, so it's not necessarily portraying it as like a necessarily these people are evil or character flaws. It's literally just kind of like, unfortunately, this is just a reality of like our society that people do this stuff. Like, so I did like how it wasn't making a massive point about it, but it was kind of hilarious how you find that Kate is getting the young kids that she's babysitting to
Yeah.
pack the drugs in the
To pack
little.
the drugs. Yeah.
I'm just like, this is absolutely hilarious. I'm just like, I can't imagine any other film is going to have a scene of little children packing drugs, but Fear Street went for it, and I'm just like, I like this. This is definitely setting it apart from the rest.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, definitely. Yeah, no, there's little things like that that are just, those little funny things that just keep setting it more and more apart from that. And they do make a point that, because they're in Shady Side, that
Hmm.
there's a difference between these two cities, these two towns. Sunnyvale is where all the rich people are, and they do everything goes well for them. And then Shady Side, everything just goes bad for them. And all these killings that have been happening over the last, like 300 years or so, have all been in Shady Side only. Nothing
Yeah.
ever bad happens in Sunnyvale. And so, all these kids who are in this, yeah, they're doing the drugs, like they're selling drugs and stuff, but they're doing it because their parents are out of work.
Hmm.
There's just bad opportunities everywhere in Shady Side. And so, they're doing it because they kind of have to, in a way. So there's no real moralizing to it, but they do have kind of an explanation for it. They don't just kind of sweep it under and just go, oh well, they're just kids doing bad things. They're like, well,
Exactly,
yeah,
100%. And I think,
they're just
you
trying to
know,
live.
exactly. And I think it does a good. It's really interesting how like across like the trilogy, because obviously having the two different, you know, towns that like are almost like a yin and yang to each other. Like it's a really interesting way that the film trilogy is kind of having like a under the surface kind of commentary on, I guess like maybe even suburbia versus inner city and stuff like that, in the sense that there's always one area that's viewed as this is where the good people are and nothing bad happens here, versus that's where all like the terrible, messed up poverty is and only
Right.
bad stuff happens there. And the film kind of, as a trilogy, kind of subverts that to say, well, no, you can't just say only good people exist in one place and only bad people exist in another. Humans are shit. There are good and shitty
Yeah,
humans everywhere.
exactly. Yeah, and that's what you see too. You're seeing, the Sunnyvale kids are douches, and the Shady Side kids, while having to, sell drugs and stuff to make ends meet and to do things that they might otherwise not do, they're essentially good people.
Yeah,
And that's what is nice about seeing something like that, that sure, they live in a bad area that has no opportunities, and all their parents are like struggling and everything, but they're just trying to do what they can to also survive and but still be good people at that. And that's what, like,
Mm-hmm.
even you see most of the shady side people in this are essentially good people. Like nobody you run across for the most part in shady side is a horrible person and deserves anything that they're getting. So
Mm-hmm.
it really does, you know, you do really do believe in this like conspiracy that something's going on that is making shady side just out to be this terrible place. And and that's, overall everything you learn is the curse of Sarah Fear. And so, but obviously we've already said that it's not quite what we're led to believe. So through all this, they are being stalked by the skull guy. The skull
Mm-hmm.
mask is what they call him. um and so they get, I don't remember who was it. Oh, okay. So when they get into the accident with the school bus and everything, Sam gets a bloody nose and ends up bleeding onto the ground. And when she touches something in the ground, she gets this sudden like shock of visions in her mind that
Mm-hmm.
we don't find out until in the third episode, is like visions of Sarah Fear. And at that point she's being stalked by Skull Mask. And through this they figure out, hey, they're trying to get to her probably because of her blood. And then like blood gets on Simon's shirt, and so they're coming after him too. And eventually it's not just Skull Mask, it's some of the other killers
Mm-hmm.
from the previous killing sprees. So like the masked killer from the what is it? Camp Nightwing from 1978, and you've got
Mm-hmm.
Ruby Lane from earlier than that. And so you've got these other killers trying to come and kill them, who should not be alive, but suddenly are, and trying to kill them all.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting that they do that. That they it adds a supernatural element to this. Obviously, I mean, we're talking about a witch named Sarah Fear and everything, that it's fun to add this extra supernatural element to essentially the normal slasher uh, uh, formula. And it's not like they
Exactly.
haven't done it before, and we've had Freddy, and we've had, Jason himself is somewhat supernatural, at least in the latter half of his series. So it's fun to, add that element to it, that doesn't always get added to it. So it's a nice addition to it.
100%. And I think like the way that slowly kind of like I love films like this that like have that bit as the characters are kind of figuring out the information as you're figuring it out. I think it's a fun way of doing it. Like sometimes you'll have a film where something the characters don't, and that's where the kind of
Mm-hmm.
interesting tension is. But I like with this film, we're none the wiser, so we're learning everything as the characters do, and I like the way the
Right.
film does it. But it's just like first it's when they're at the house, Dina realizes that like the skull mask guy is there, but then it turns out Sam isn't there. He has followed him to the house because that's obviously where Simon's bloody shirt is, but they didn't
Right.
realize at the time. And then, it follows them to the hospital, and that's where Sam is because they at first she thought it was the douchey boyfriend, but the douchey
Right.
boyfriend
Yeah.
gets killed by Skull Mask.
Right in front of them. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, they're just like I just really like the way the film just adds to it bit by bit, bit by bit, and you
Right.
realize what is actually going on. And quickly you learn that Josh was right from the start that this is the curse of Sarah Fear. All the friends
Right.
eventually actually believe him once they realize,
Yeah.
oh, these people who shouldn't be alive have started following us around. That's not normal.
Right. Because at one point Skull Mask does get like unmasked
Yep.
again, and you see that it's the same kid from earlier who was shot in the head. He is there, and he's got the bullet hole in his head, but he's still walking around alive. So it's a it adds to all of that, all of their panic and everything else, and rightfully so. I mean, you've got these guys who are coming back from the dead and who cannot be stopped, and you're just trying to figure out exactly how to do it. And so then they finally figure out how to stop these killers from coming for them, and how to hopefully break this curse from coming for Sam. And they figure out, well, we need to kill Sam. Sam needs to die, and so that but be brought back afterward, but make sure she dies enough times, because that's what happened to this character that they find out named C. Berman, who was the person who survived the Camp Nightwing massacre.
100%.
And so yeah, go ahead, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I think, isn't it just before they have that realization of, like, C. Berman's existence and what they need to do? Like,
Right.
they have their entire plan of, will burn them all in, like, the high school bathroom, and that
Oh,
entire
right.
set piece is so
Yeah,
well done, when the way
really
they
well done.
lure
Yeah.
them. But also, I just love that moment how it's like literally all of the characters like have some form of like sexual intimacy. Like, it's
Yes.
just like, because they obviously had to check each other's bodies to make sure there was no extra Sam's blood there, so that there's no one that could follow, none of the monsters would follow them. And they each have different moments of like checking each other's bodies and then going, we might die, let's do something. And then Simon, just on his own, is checking his own body, and then just obviously has his own solo fun. And they
Yeah.
all reconvene before like trapping the killer monster creatures. And Simon's just like, wait, did you all go to Pound Town? And he's just like, so did I. It was just like, I thought it was like a really kind of like in well done scene, because like
Yeah.
so many kind of like slashers, and particularly kind of like, I guess if you think about like the teen slashers of the 90s, which obviously part one is kind of reminiscent of, so
Right.
many of them have like a lot of kind of like heavily sexual scenes and stuff like that. And I kind of like how this film includes that, but in a kind of more kind of nuanced way. So yeah, I like
Right.
how they had that element to it as well. So it did feel like it was definitely drawing from a lot of the 90s slashers and that era of films for horror. But yeah, and then obviously they kill all the monsters, and then they start
Right.
just, you have that black ooze as the bodies just start coming together again.
Reforming.
It's
Yeah.
like, oh shit, we don't know what to do. And that's, as I said, then they realize, oh, Sam needs to die.
Right. No, and I think you brought up a good point about the sexuality in this, and all that, this movie series doesn't shy away from that,
Mm-hmm.
which is good. I think that it's interesting too, and I'm not sure how much sexuality was in the books themselves, but um but it was nice to see in a movie series that was made here in the 2020s that they didn't shy away from that, that they included that, because that is part of horror, and just part of being a teenager in general, that
Mm-hmm.
the heightened tension and everything else is just going to be a part of that. And I mean, you get a little bit of it in 1978 as well,
Yeah.
and I get a little bit more, because you actually get a tiny bit of nudity in 78. You don't get any in this one, but so it's interesting to um get this in these two movies, at least in these first two, where they actually kind of focus on that. They don't shy away from it. And especially in this day and age where we're starting to get this weird Puritanism. It just popped up on
Mm-hmm.
Twitter again just the other day. People were like, the discourse around sex scenes in movies being a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. Having sex scenes in movies is not a bad thing. um just because you don't like it, don't watch those movies then. Like,
Exactly. And
that's all I have to
also,
say. If you don't like sex and nudity, don't watch those movies.
100%. And like, just as a mini little aside just on that topic though. But when you're having that discourse, like so much of like, the kind of comments are all about, oh, like, what does it add to the narrative? What's the point? What's the need for the scene in it? And it's just like humans just in general have sex. Like, this is
Yeah.
a story about human characters having sex as part of just being human. So, like,
Right.
why, to me, it's weirder when you have like all these films that don't have any intimacy whatsoever. Like, whether that's
Yeah.
like, full on sex or just like, like some form of like sexual intimacy, whatever. And it's just like, it's weird when it's absent because it just feels robotic. So yeah, I'll never
Right.
understand it. Like, what's the need for it? There doesn't need to be a need. It's just humans being humans. Stop
Right.
being a puritanical weirdo.
And it's like, I'm perfectly fine with the Marvel movies not having much in the way of that because it's an action movie. It's based in comic books and stuff like that. It sure you could put some stuff into it, and I wouldn't be opposed to it and everything, but they're never going to be that overly sexual anyway because they have to meet that PG-13 rating. So they'll
100%.
never go above that. I mean,
They
some
ne-
will, like Deadpool and stuff, but and I was grateful for Deadpool, and I'm grateful, hopefully, that Deadpool 3 is going to stick to its R rating and that we'll get some of that in there. But
yeah.
it's, I just think that, in general, like, I guess, because I guess somebody complained about how Oppenheimer had like nude scenes with Florence Pugh and Gillian Murphy. And I'm like, so I haven't even seen Oppenheimer yet, but I'm like, but obviously it was about them having sex and having a relationship and the casual intimacy and being able to be naked in front of each other. That's part of that. It's part of this. I understand that. I haven't even seen the damn movie. um
Hmm.
and that's what's nice about this trilogy of movies, at least these first two movies, is that they delve into that. They know kids, people in their 20s, early 20s or whatever, late teens, they're going to have sex. That's not something you should shy away from just because it makes people uncomfortable. So it should
Exactly.
make you uncomfortable. That sex is uncomfortable. It's if it's it's like we watched Game of Thrones, and sometimes our kids would watch Game of Thrones, and they were still kids at the time. They were middle school, high school, whatever, and
Hmm.
sometimes they'd sit and watch it with us. And I just saw that today. Somebody was saying, well, in recognition of the discourse again, what was the thing that you watched with your parents or whatever that was you probably shouldn't have? And some people were like, yeah, Game of Thrones. Because yeah, Game of Thrones was kind of like, I think Game of Thrones is fairly tame compared to something like, actually, like Spartacus. If anybody's actually seen the Stars TV
Oh,
series Spartacus,
the
Spartacus was
steamiest of
sexual.
steamy shows. I
Oh, it was
miss
so
Spartacus.
sexual.
Oh, it was perfect. It was
Like, you think
beautiful.
Game of Thrones was bad?
Yeah,
Spartacus was like way over that. So
100%.
I mean,
God, I miss
it
that
was
show.
it was it, it was like raunchy, like very close to, if they had shown much more, they would have probably gotten an X rating.
Oh,
But
100%. It was basically like one level away from being porn, and I loved it. It was like
yeah,
we need more stuff like that. But no, like I know we're getting off a little bit off track about the Fear
right,
Street films, but like I think it's an important conversation to have
it is.
and like these films like do kind of touch on it in an interesting way. But like that whole thing of like, oh, like like you know, yeah, it can obviously be a little bit awkward, like, watching sex scenes when your parents are in the room. But
Right,
like ultimately, the only reason it's kind of awkward is because in like kind of our Western society, very much nuclear family, kind of monogamous society, talking about sex is something that just doesn't really happen that much. So it's kind
right,
of becomes weirder when it's like watching a sex scene with your parents in the room. Like in theory, because we're all just humans, it shouldn't have to be something
right,
that has this level of weirdness or awkwardness attached to it. But I think it's just society has conditioned us to view it as a weird, awkward thing. So yeah,
right,
like it, because if you think about it, back in like, hunter gatherer era, like, of previous like generations of humans, like, entire family units, like, lived in these like small tiny tents, do you think that, parents weren't
Yeah.
like having sex with each other just because their kids were in the tent? No, of course,
Right.
of course they were, because like having sex is
You had
human.
to
So
do it
yeah,
when you had to do it. Yeah.
exactly. Like, you weren't going to go out into the wilderness where like animals would get you. No, you're staying in your tent. Like, kids
Yeah.
be kids. But yeah, that's a little random tangent. But
No,
yes.
but I agree with that because like when my kids would watch Game of Thrones, we would be watching it and the kids would come out and we'd be like, okay, well, this is Game of Thrones, there might be nudity. We're not changing it, but so if you can't handle that, you can either go away or you can cover your eyes or whatever you want to do. And they never did. They just
Yeah,
watched it because, you know, it we didn't make it uncomfortable. We didn't make it
exactly.
a whole thing of, oh, there's going to be boobs, like cover your eyes. We were just like, if you need to, you can, but if not, that's fine. We can be adults and just watch the show and enjoy the show
Hmm.
for what it is. And like that's the thing. My daughter and I, we go to movies now where I can't even remember. There was something recently. Oh, we went to like No Hard Feelings, and there's a really quick scene with full frontal nude Jennifer Lawrence in it, and neither one of
Hmm.
us got awkward because it's just a movie, so
Exactly. And also, I'm just like, silently, like, applauding you, because it's just like, that's the right way to do it. You don't make, like, yes, that's the right way to do it. It's only becomes weird and awkward when you make it a weird and awkward thing. If
right,
you just kind of, as you
exactly,
said, simply just say, hey, this is the thing. You decide how you want to react to it. Boom. There you go.
exactly.
That's how you raise good humans. So I'm just like applauding. But yes, coming back to the film, I really enjoy
Yes,
how the Fear Street films have that little element in it. And as you said, the last bit we actually touched on was that they realized C. Berman survived
yes,
by dying. So they
yes.
hatched this plan of having to kill Sam. And I love how the fact that it's Kate and Simon were the school drug dealers. They're the ones that know how to kill Sam in a safe way. They're just like, all right, take
Yeah,
these pills for this, these pills for that, but don't take them too soon. You have to take them at the
yeah,
right time. Oh, I love how it's like, and you can tell that clearly there was research gone into it, because that they're not just making that up. Like, that feels very
right.
accurate, that these pills do this, these pills do that, take them in this order, and your heart will stop and then we can revive you.
Right. Well, and they make a point of it because Simon's brother had died.
Yeah.
Briefly, he had OD'd. And so Simon was like, yes, so it's this combination because I know like what
What my brother
my
died.
brother OD'd on. And so but I think it's interesting too. I thought it was funny. I saw somebody online, I think it was probably on Letterboxd, mentioned like there was literally like, why did they make her choke those pills down? Like, you couldn't have gotten a bottle of water. You were in a grocery store. Why couldn't you have gotten her a bottle of water or something to help her get those pills down? They were like, just like, especially when the killer showed up and they were like, okay, we gotta hurry up, we gotta finish this, and they were like, Dina was basically shoving the pills into her mouth. And it was like, give her some water. Like, it was such a weird thing to do. It was like,
Well, I
just
think,
like made me uncomfortable.
yeah, definitely. But I think it wasn't, she was taking them normally, I think, at first, but then she obviously, because her body was reacting, she started to vomit. So I think that was just Dina. And like, that's one of those things where it's like, it's always so tricky when we're watching, particularly this type of like, slasher or teen horror films, where characters kind of make decisions and we're watching it in this kind of very safe, logical like perspective, like where we're safe at home in our on our bed or on our couch, and we're kind of going, as you said, why aren't you just drinking water? Like, that's such a stupid thing to
Right.
do. Whereas like those characters are in a stressful situation, and particularly
Right.
now that there's a killer there, so it's so sometimes it's very easy to kind of say, oh, why didn't the character do this, or why didn't the character do that? And it's just like, well, how would you react if you were in that exact scenario?
Right.
So like, who knows, maybe if we were in the exact same replicated scenario, we'd do the same thing and we wouldn't even think to grab water, because we're just like, shit, the killer is coming, we need to get these
Right.
pills down
No,
now.
I know. I just
But
thought it was funny.
it is kind of, it does kind of stand out though. But I think maybe that's why it's done well, that it kind of
Right.
does, it's memorable, like it stands
Right.
out and it makes it more stressful. Like if it had been, as you said, just goes for the water, it might not have been as tense a situation for the film. So yeah, it's interesting.
Right.
But
Yeah.
also we're in the grocery market or store, and we have probably one of the best set pieces in a lot of modern horror that I've seen in a long time. One of the grossest but awesome deaths.
Yeah. 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 You're talking about Kate, right? Like getting
Oh, I
with the
know,
bread
poor Kate,
slicer.
because like she
So
was such a fun character.
she was too. I was sad to see her go. But the interesting bit about that was that Lee Janiak, the person who directed these movies, she
Mm-hmm.
wanted the bread slicer, and the I guess the special effects people were like, "That's not going to work. That will never slice a head," and so they got a bread slicer and they put a watermelon through it, and it worked. And so they were like, "Okay, we're wrong. We'll do it." So, so now a bread slicer really will cut through a human head.
Ooh, that's a, but oh god, like, but I love
Oh,
how, like, they didn't, because like that's the thing as well with a lot of teen horrors, particularly modern teen horrors, they do kind of, because they obviously, because if they're teen horrors, they're, especially if they're getting like theatrical releases and they're
right,
geared towards teens, they obviously want to get a certain rating to be able to be
right.
get teenagers into seats. So a lot of the times, like, horror films that are very like aesthetically and thematically teen horror films will pull away from the very gory scenes
Yeah,
and then only show the aftermath. But I kind of like, because this is like a Netflix film and it's a
Netflix. Yeah,
streamer film, there isn't, they don't have to have a theatrical rating. So this is a teen horror film that doesn't pull punches with the gore scenes. So I love how
right.
they literally show the entire bread slicer sequence, and it is so hard to watch,
It's
like, because
so hard to watch. It's very gory.
yeah, very gory.
Yeah, no, it's on par with like Evil Dead level of gory. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's just yeah, it's intense. But yeah, no, it's great. It's a great bit. And I agree. Yeah, normally when you have to make a PG-13 movie, you have to sanitize things because you're trying to do it for the widest audience. So anytime you do something like that, you're going to cut down on a lot of stuff. You're going to maybe show the knife entering, but break away real quick and like
Yeah.
not show much in the way of blood or gore. And so it's disappointing for that aspect of it, sure, but it's understandable because they're trying to go for a wider audience. Something like this year's Megan, which
Mm-hmm.
in its PG-13 version, I still liked it in the theater. I loved that movie. I thought it was
Oh, it was
fantastic.
so fun.
It was so fun. But a lot of people didn't really enjoy it because it seemed sanitized, and which it was a PG-13 movie. And so, but when it released on video, they added the it like extended or unrated cut, and that way they added more of the blood and the gore and stuff like that to give it more of that impact of probably what they intended originally, but then
Mm-hmm.
had to cut back for the wider audience. So but yeah, so it's nice to see them do that because they have the ability to on Netflix, because they don't have the same censors, because it's a streamer. They can do whatever the hell they want. So
Exactly.
and again, this is what kind of plays into that: more gore, the more sex, cursing and stuff like that. They're able to
Mm-hmm.
get away with a lot of stuff that if they had tried to put these out in theaters, oh, these would
Oh,
have not had the same impact, and I don't think would have been nearly as good.
100%. I think the reason that they are so effective is because they're, like, as you said, they don't pull away from anything. Like, they lean into the gore, which is like, and I'm just like, as much as I do think, streamers have in so many ways negatively impacted the, like, cinemas and, like, the whole movie going experience, I do kind of wish we'd get more teen horrors that are for, like, direct for streamers,
Right.
because then you don't have those as much ratings or censors, so they can do more. So yeah, I just wish that I hope like I do know that I heard that there is supposed to be more Fair Street films in the works. And so yeah, hopefully we do get more in time because these three are just do such a good job collectively.
Right. No, and I I understand people's problems with streamers. And I agree, especially in part that they need to be paying their talent more, paying
Mm-hmm.
writers and everything, paying residuals. The fact that they're not doing that is just abominable. And I'm glad they're striking right now. So, and I will support that until they get what they need. So, but on the same token, I do believe that the streamers are holding a good place over not only broadcast networks, but also over the cable networks, that they're able to do things that nobody else can do because they have the freedom to do that. They have no restrictions on anything other than, whatever they choose to have restrictions on. So it's nice
Mm-hmm.
to see them branch out and do these things. Such as Fear Street, or any of the other things that they've done that things that I haven't watched or whatever, like maybe like Mindhunter or something like that, where they're able to explore you
Yeah.
know other avenues of things in a deeper way, that and be able to show things that nobody else is willing to show. And so I very much applaud that. Now, that being said, Netflix has a bad habit of like of their movies being just, I don't know, like 15, 20 minutes, sometimes 30 minutes too long. So
Yeah.
I want them to learn how to edit just a little bit, just to cut some of the extras, like the extra bits that don't need to be there. So that's my one complaint, is that a lot of Netflix movies that I watch over the last year or two, especially, just seem to be a little too bloated. They
Yeah.
could just do with a little bit of extra trimming. Not all, but some.
Definitely, I think so. Like there definitely needs to be some more people on the editing floor with some Netflix films. But I think in general though, maybe that's just a reflection of the way a lot of things have changed. Because like,
Right.
we're getting more and more like both on streamers and theatrically longer movies, like,
Right.
across the
Yeah.
board. Like, it feels like, the days of like a solid 90-minute film are kind of gone. Like we're
Sadly.
getting
Yeah.
I know, I love like that's one of my favorite things when you check a film and you're just like, oh, 90 minutes, perfect. I can throw this on. Because like
Yeah.
so sometimes if you see a film and it's like says 2 hours or 2.5 hours, you're just like, oh, that's a that's
Yeah.
gonna be a bit of an investment.
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely takes a lot longer. Like 90 minutes, I'm good for. Like, especially a sub 90-minute movie. You can give me like 87 minutes. Ooh, it's even better.
Exactly.
But
Especially if it's a shit movie, it's not that long.
yes, exactly. Oh, I can't tell you how many movies I've watched where I'm just like, oh my God. But don't get me wrong. There are some that are 87 minutes or even 80 minutes, and those are too long. So,
Oh yeah, like in
especially if
general,
they're
like,
really shitty.
as much as I do like, solid, as you said, an 87 or 90-minute runtime film, I'm a firm believer that, like, a film's runtime is as long as it needs to be to tell the story effectively. Like, for
Yes,
example,
exactly.
I have seen Oppenheimer in film, and that's like, that's a post 3 hour film, but it doesn't feel like it because
You're
it's
right.
just
Yeah.
so well made and so well told that it
You're
doesn't feel
engrossed the whole
long.
time. Yeah.
Exactly. So whereas, as you said, you can sometimes have like a 90-minute film that feels like it's three
Oh,
hours long because
feels
it's
like a 3 hour movie. Yeah.
exactly. So yeah, I think on the whole, most films, if they're told well, it doesn't really matter what the
Yeah. It
runtime
doesn't
is.
matter what the runtime is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do agree that some Netflix films are a little bit bloated. Or even their
Yeah.
TV series or anything. A lot of
Oh,
times
yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
like, oh, this documentary series that's 8 episodes long really could have been four.
Yeah. 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 Maybe maybe that's where they need to, like, they'd save some money, if they could, I don't know, cut some of that down. Don't give everybody everything they want. But
Exactly.
give the right people exactly enough of what they want. Like, I don't want to take away from anybody. That's fine. Fix it in
Just
editing.
yeah,
That's
spread it
really
out.
where it needs to be done.
Make it more equitable.
Yeah. But anyway,
Yeah.
back to Fear Street. But yeah, so they figure out Sam needs to die. This is so funny because we got wildly off topic.
Oh, I know.
And so they try to do the pill thing, but the killers are there, so they have to fast track it. And so Dina now has to basically drown Sam in like a fish tank,
Yeah, in
which
the
is
lobster
just
tank.
yeah, which is just gross.
Oh yeah, like that's not gonna
It's
be
just
nice
so
water.
dirty and gross. Like, I get that you're killing her, but like, I don't know. It's like infection after the fact is not going to be good. So
Oh, I know exactly. But it's kind of like it's one of those things where it's like they obviously had to kill her in such a way that they could bring
yeah,
her back. So they couldn't do anything
exactly.
brutalistic, that would have been
No, they
quicker.
couldn't like
You know,
stab her in the heart or anything.
exactly.
Yeah,
They had to do something that would allow them to bring her back. So they were
yeah,
obviously very limited with options. But I do love how like we have the entire sequence as like she's trying to drown Sam when Josh is like running away from one of the killers. We've got Kate being killed in the bread slicer. Simon is also running around trying to avoid being killed. And then you
yeah.
just have like every now and then it just pans to the little lobster just making its way up the shopping aisle. Just like I just love those hilarious shots where you're just like because it's obviously a close in on the lobster, but it's just in the background you just see Sam's body flailing as it's being
Yeah.
drowned, and I'm just whoever like put this
This is
shot
very
in,
good
thank
camera
you,
work. Yeah.
very like just thank you for this shot because it's just like I think it leans into the campness that a lot of
Yes.
90s teen horror films had. Like, so I love how these films, like as you said, they reuse a lot of tropes, but they don't do it in it doesn't feel like it's just done in a picking something off the shopping rack way. Like it
Right.
feels like, they're doing it like out of respect. Like they know what works and they're
Yes.
doing it well. Like it's not just, oh, this is what's been done before. We're just gonna do it. They actually there's been a lot of well thought out like heart behind each thing they're pulling off in the
Right.
film.
Well, and this movie specifically is definitely an homage to the 90s era,
Yeah.
like post Scream slashers.
Mm-hmm.
So it does that very well with a lot of the humor, and like you said, like we said, is the tropes that they use and everything. And I mean, we get the same thing in 1978 where the 78 plays with a lot of the tropes of slashers of that, like camp, like the camp killer
Mm-hmm.
genre that was more a staple of the 80s, but definitely plays into all of those tropes as well, which is nice and fun because it's having them do that in both of these is makes them both more enjoyable
Yeah.
in that way, because you get to acknowledge, oh yeah, that's what's in these movies, that's cool, that's fun, while also still telling their very own story. um
Mm-hmm.
you know and so you know so they figure out, they get Sam dies, they bring her back. When she dies, the killers go away.
Yeah.
And then when she comes back, um uh she is now, like, is it, it's not
Well, she comes
immediate,
back.
but
No, exactly.
yeah,
It's not immediate. She comes back and she seems to be normal and fine. And they all go
right,
back to Dina's house. And it's when, like, and also, like, Josh as a character has had a bit of, like, character growth in that he's, like, actually ordered pizza. Like, because they
yeah,
made a lot of comments that he was, like, so withdrawn into himself. He didn't really know how to branch out and, like, engage with other people and stuff like that. So it's obviously he's gained more independence as the film has gone on.
right,
But it is that moment where Dina and him are just talking, and then the phone rings. Dina answers it, and it's C. Berman who's rang them back. And,
yes,
it turns out she goes, it's not over, it's never over. And then it turns out that Sam has been possessed or turned or something.
turned her,
And
yeah,
yeah, she goes very Evil Dead kind of dead
yeah,
ice.
very feral, yeah,
Yeah.
just grunts and groans. She's got like no, like, communication skills anymore. And yeah, um yeah, and then she attacks him, she kills Simon. and
Mm-hmm.
and then they have to stop her, and uh do they go to see Berman's house in this one, or is it in the next episode? The next one.
They do end up at see Berman's house. Like they
Okay.
like it ends up with like them there because like they obviously have Sam in the car, and
Right,
like
right,
it ends I think with the boot lid opening and Sam is there, and then the
right,
second film picks up exactly from there where Sam is
right,
like
right,
brought in and C Berman starts obviously telling them the story of her
right.
night camp Nightwing experience, and that's when it goes back to 78. And I just love
Yes.
the like the look and feel of 1978, like the film, like it's like because obviously it's the different era, so it's like the costuming is like feels very accurate and feels very different. It's much brighter of a film, like because 1994 as a film, the entire it takes place at nighttime the entire time, like there's no daytime shots,
Yeah.
whereas 78 is like much brighter and most of it is daytime. And yeah, I just really like the feel and vibe of it, and obviously as you said it's kind of now more paying homage to the, I guess like the Friday films, the kind of camp counselor style
Friday the 13th,
films.
the burning, stuff like
Exactly.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just really enjoy it. And also it brings in like C. Berman as a young character, the main character, Sadie Sink, another Stranger Things
Yes.
actress, and she's just fantastic. Like I just love her in this film. Like as an actress in general, I think she's so good, but she's really great.
Yes.
She just like she stands out in this film. Like she definitely carries a lot of the scenes, I think.
Oh yeah. No, she's definitely, the main character in this. She's her character is Ziggy Berman, and her sister is Christine Berman, I think. Oh no, Cindy Berman.
Yes.
And so, we're meant to think that Cindy Berman is C Berman.
Yeah.
So because Ziggy and Cindy. So we're meant to think that Cindy is the younger version of um Jillian Jacobs' character, that
Mm-hmm.
Dina and them have just now gone to her house and is being told the story. But we so we get it, you know, we get involved with this, and now it's Ziggy is being harassed by obviously the Sunnyvale kids,
Mm-hmm.
and uh Nick Good, who is the sheriff in 1994, he stops them and tries to get them to um, uh, leave her alone and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously because he likes her. And so over the course of things, they uh, what is it? Ziggy needs to go get her arm treated for a burn that she was given by one of the bitchy girls, and she goes to the nurse, who turns out to be Nurse Lane, who is Ruby Lane's mother. And Ruby
Mm-hmm.
Lane was one of the killers. So was the killer, like, I guess 16 years before. And so then we've got that, but she's got a mysterious book on her desk. And it's like a book of witchcraft or something. You don't really know what it is at first, but then she um she tries to kill um Tommy, right?
Yes, because I think
Yes.
that's what it is. Because like she obviously wants to bring forth somehow the next killer, I guess.
Right.
Yeah, like I think there's a good few more kind of subplots happening in this film compared to
Right.
94, which like you know there's a lot more threads that you have to kind of hold on to at the same time when you're watching
Right.
78 compared to 94. And like so that even when I rewatched it, and I've watched it a few times now, but even when I am rewatching it, I'm just like, wait, what's happening again at this moment? Because it does
Right.
feel a little bit like narratively it feels a little bit more disjointed than 94. Like overall, I still really enjoy part two, like just because I guess more of the setting, and I think there's great set pieces again. But yeah,
Right.
there's definitely a good few different things happening at the same time, and
Well,
you
I
just
think
have to catch yourself going, wait, oh yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah.
Well, I think because 78 is trying to tell the bulk of the story there, because,
Yes.
it's trying to lay a lot of the groundwork for what you're going to discover in the third episode, 1666 slash
Hmm.
1994 part two. And so, it lays a lot more of that groundwork, whereas the first one is more about introducing everything and introducing all the ideas and everything. And then this one, the main plot of this is that Ziggy finds the book, and her sister um has to deal with, like, suddenly her, like, so her boyfriend, Cindy's boyfriend Tommy, is attacked by the nurse, and she tries to kill him. And he obviously uh doesn't get killed, but he's worried that, he's gonna die, because that's what she said, he's gonna die tonight. And so that's kind of like the main thing that's going on. There's this, like, they're trying to figure out why she would do something like that, but
Yeah, and like I think it's also like
like you said, there's so much going on, and I kind of want to, like, kind of hit, like, the big beats of everything, and
yeah,
it's kind of
like
hard to
it's
hit them all.
very, as you said, it's very lore heavy compared to
Yeah,
part one. Like part one was more kind of just like evade the killers, and this is what we need to do
is
to.
more a straight up
Yeah,
slasher.
it's a
Yeah,
lot more straight up, whereas part like this one is much more lore heavy, and it's trying to, as I said, lay the groundwork for the last leg of the trilogy. So it's definitely got a lot more going on that it's trying to resolve. Like I think there's also like there's the whole like I guess the what the plots are revolving around is that there's like the kind of the two warring sides of the camp that you've got
yeah, the
camp
shady side
and
versus the
yeah,
Sunnyvale. Yeah,
exactly. So they're like doing like kind of like a capture the flag type situation thing where it's like one type of there's only one winning team, basically red versus blue. But it's just like I
right,
do love when they're obviously like the camp counselors are like obviously trying to like encourage all like the teens or the teens and the kids to kind of get in the spirit for this type of like game. There's just like where it's like the older good brother, he's just like we've got Sunnyvale versus Shady Side, and he's like doing this whole speech, and then he just goes good versus evil, and it's just like, wait,
yeah,
what? Like, do you really like view the other part of town that badly that you literally just consider them all to be evil? Like, it's
right,
just like, God, you've got some issues, man. Jesus.
yeah.
But yeah, like so that's happening, and we've obviously got the camps dispersed across the entire like massive acres that the camp takes place. So there's all these
Yeah.
different people scattered about while Tommy then gets possessed by Sarah Sarah Fear, or yeah, it's Sarah Fear that
Yes.
possesses people, isn't it? Yes, it's Sarah Fear
Yeah.
that possesses them. Yeah, so gets possessed by Sarah Fear and obviously starts going on a killing rampage.
So I
Or
will
no,
say
actually, it
no.
no,
So
Sarah
he's
Fear doesn't do the possessing. It's
no.
the
So
devil that does
yeah,
it, isn't
yeah,
it? Yeah,
yeah. It so we find out in the last movie that
yes,
that somebody is controlling them through this there's this underground, and we find out in this movie, in the second movie,
yeah,
that there's this underground cavern system, and then there is like this altar to the devil,
yeah, and
and
also the
there's
weird
these
undulating
stones.
ooze.
Yeah, and there's these stones with with all these names on them, and in this, Tommy Slater's name is on that, include, and at the bottom below, like Ruby Lanes and some of the other killers that have come before that. And so
Hmm.
when your name is written on that, then you're the one being controlled and being, sent to do the bidding of whoever.
Yeah,
Whoever is controlling you. So there, because there is somebody who's made a pact with the devil and is doing that for that, so uh but so that's kind of what we find out in this one, like just to cut it quickly, is that you find out that underneath the camp is this altar, and
Mm-hmm.
they get down there. Cindy Berman and another girl go down there and find it, along with Alice is her name, and Alice's boyfriend go down there, um and they are quickly attacked by Tommy, and it's and then they're trapped down there for a bit, while Tommy then goes back up and starts killing. And like, so this is something that I thought was interesting too. Like in the 80s, we didn't get a lot of kids being killed. Every once in a while, a kid would get killed in a movie and stuff like that. But largely in the slashers, they kind of
Mm-hmm.
left the little kids alone. Like teenagers were fair game, but little kids were left alone. In this
Yep.
one, man, the little kids are getting slaughtered.
Oh yeah.
So it was crazy. I mean, you don't see it. They're not
Yeah,
showing,
you
like,
don't
this is
see it.
an
You just see
instance
the
where they kind of
after
do it off
effect.
camera. So, but yeah, so this one is interesting because 78 is, like I said earlier, 78 also has an instance of, there's more nudity in this,
Mm-hmm.
just a little bit. There's even more sex, like more overt sex. Like in the
Yeah.
first one, they they allude to things happening, but they don't actually show you anything. Well, this
Yeah,
time
they
there's at
show the
least two
build up.
instances of, yeah, they this time they show people like mid coitus, like actually having sex with each other. And you don't see anything really too much, except for the second time where you see a hint of a boob. So it's really not that bad. And then the guy's butt. So after he gets up. So it's not a whole lot of nudity, but it's enough. But there's more sexuality in this one because I'm presuming most of these kids are either late teens, early 20s, the ones running the camp anyway.
Yeah, the counselors would be older, so that's why I think
Yeah,
they can kind of get away with showing more of it because like
right,
it's they would be older given that the rest of the kids in the camp are younger, like so I like again, as I said, the film kind of, yeah, this would happen. Counselors would totally be
yeah,
fucking each other at camp. They're there for the entire summer. They're young horny people. That's definitely happening. So I like how the film just confirms it. And again, it's taking from like the tropes of those, even though they are technically the 80s era slashers, but
right,
78 is on the cusp of that. But it's taking from like the Friday the 13th films and all that, where
yeah,
it is about camp counselors who basically are having sex the
right,
entire time. And that's why they're being killed, because they're having sex. Because, yay, we love our moral messaging in that era of horror.
right.
But
But
yeah, this
yeah, so I mean,
film,
between the like the hard kills, like they're killing kids, and then they're like, there's sexuality and stuff going on in this. I thought it was interesting that this one was kind of the more like um like elevated one for that. Like they made it not like elevated horror, but they
mhm,
elevated the sex and and the violence in this one, even more so than in the last one.
yeah.
So I thought it was an interesting, and especially because I do think it is in a way it's actually a commentary, because like we said, it's more about each one of these movies kind of touches on and is an homage to those genres of slashers and stuff, of those particular eras where the 70s and 80s, you had more nudity, you had more sex, you had more violence. Well, the violent that you thought there was more violence. I mean, looking back on a lot of the 80s movies, it wasn't really as bad as it as they tried to make it seem to be, especially in the wake of like the 90s and early 2000s, where they started getting really brutal. So
Oh yeah, like the noughties era of horror was brutalistic horror. But yeah, I like how each film is, as you said, doing that. It's paying an homage to a different type of genre of horror film, or even an era of that
yeah,
same genre. So yeah, I think it does it well. And yeah, 78. I do enjoy it, even though obviously, like narratively wise, there's a lot more going on, so it's very lore heavy, but I still think it just looks really nice. And again, it's got some really good set pieces and kills. And it does have like kind of like a strong, like it's interesting, even though you're watching 78, you know it's a flashback, so you know that there's only going to be kind of one survivor and all of that. It still packs like a strong emotional core to it, like the two sisters, like, and Cindy and Ziggy, like, you really kind of feel for them for what they go through, even though you kind of go into this film knowing what's going to happen anyway.
Right. Yeah, and everybody's going to get massacred. You know that C. Berman is going to get killed, but somehow survive in the end, and that's the way she survived and got away from it all. Um, but yeah, so it's this one, and this one we learn, like I said, we learn about the book, and we learn about we learn that they figure out through the course of this that Seraphir's hand was separated from her body, and this
Mm-hmm.
all of this is like the curse can't be lifted unless you put her hand back with her body.
Yeah, unless
um
she gets laid to rest.
yes, and so that is how they think they need to stop the curse. And so they attempt to do that, and they're not successful in this movie, obviously, because we still have a third one to go. um but we do discover at the end, both Cindy Berman and Ziggy, the sisters, they get out, they escape, but then they are attacked at the very end, and it sucks really bad because Cindy is actually killed by her boyfriend Tommy.
Yeah.
And just I can't even imagine, like, he's controlled, he's no longer himself, but that's still that realization that you're being killed by somebody you loved, is just like, it's just so messed up.
Oh,
um
100%. And actually, just touching on when you said that, he's controlled, I like how this film, it shows that, like, the person getting possessed, getting controlled
right,
isn't like an immediate thing. Like, it's a gradual thing for
it's a
Tommy. Like,
gradual thing, yeah.
and I really like that element of it because obviously the first film, 94, part one, we don't see like what happens with Ryan Torres. We just kind of see him go, and then it's only at the end after he gets killed when the mask gets pulled off that you realize that's who it is.
Right.
Whereas I like with this one, you kind of see the gradual process as Tommy starts to change from being Tommy to being controlled by these satanic forces. And yeah, so yeah, God, like Cindy, the way she dies getting killed by her boyfriend would not be yeah, you can't imagine what's going through her head at that moment.
Yeah. And then Ziggy's also being attacked, she's being killed, and then but Nick Good shows up and revives her,
Mm-hmm.
because he's fallen in love with her, um as we assume at that point. But that's how we know she died and was able to come back. But Cindy is dead, so we now know that Ziggy, slightly afterward, she's on the gurney, and they ask her what's her name, and she says Ziggy, and he says, uh I can't remember, is her name Christine? I don't know, it's another C name.
Yeah.
So and then you realize that she's actually C. Berman because she's the one who's still alive. And so that's who Ziggy is the younger version of the character that Dina and all of them have met now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was. It was Christine, Ziggy Berman, and her sister was Cindy. Yeah, so they're
Yes.
both obviously C's. So that's where the
Yes.
confusion was. um,
Well, and they did that, like, then they've done that twice now, a little bit. They did that with the Cindy Berman part of it, but they also did that in the beginning of the first one, where Dina's broken up with somebody named Sam, and so they keep playing with your expectations of who these people are, and
mm-hmm.
everything. So it's a interesting little bit for each one of those. So it's nice to they keep doing little things like that. So but that gets us to 1666, sort of, because Dina, she she finds the hand, right? Because she finds
Yeah.
that it's buried next to the tree, because that's what they did, and this it's buried next to the tree in the mall. Um, and but now they need to get back and take it to the body because they know where the body is because they discovered it
Yeah,
when um
after the crash in the
Sam,
first one.
yeah, exactly. So now they got to reunite them, and I think they get back there, right, and that's when um she suddenly has all the memories of 1666, if I'm
Yeah, so
remembering
it's when
correctly.
when she reunites the hand with the body, that's
Right,
when like she so because yeah, so we get like part two like doesn't yeah part two like we get like so Christine or Ziggy has told her story, and
right,
then it kind of does have a little bit of 90, they're back in 94 after finishing hearing the story, and that's when they go to, as you said, get the hand and reunite it. And it's only then when she touches the body, like reunites the hand with the body, she gets obviously what happened, I think, with Sam. She gets all of the visions of like Sarah Fear kind of like invades her mind almost. And
right.
then that's how part three starts from 1966. Or no,
Yeah,
1666.
1666. Yeah. But yeah, so then we get this where the characters of Sarah Fear and her friends and her brother are all played by the characters we've already come to know. So
Yeah.
they're so it's an interesting little bit there. And we discover that um Sarah Fear is in love with another girl, and it's being it's Sam in this version as well. So
Mm-hmm.
so she the pastor's daughter.
Yes, she
Okay,
is the pastor's daughter in part
right.
in 1666.
And then Sarah Fear has been like is her she is friends with um what is it, Solomon Good, right, whose wife and child have died. And then she's so there's kind of like a connection there where I think Solomon Good wants her for his wife or whatever. um but um
Yeah, and I
she
think with 1666 as well, isn't it that there's been some like mysterious like kind of death like in the town, and isn't that why
right,
like they obviously there's been or mysterious goings on anyway. I'm not sure if there was death, but there's definitely something odd going on, and that's
right.
why they target also, I think, Sarah Fear and the previous iteration of Sam.
Right.
Or actually, no, I
Well,
think her.
they go out for a nighttime. All the young, the younger kids, the
Yeah,
teenagers or whatever, they go out for a night out in the woods, where they drink and they party and they have fun and everything like that. And in this version, the character who's played by the character who played Tommy Slater is now like peeking in them and like, oh, saying they're so sinful and everything, and sees that Sarah and the Sam
it's
character
actually
in this one. Oh,
her
go ahead.
past version was Hannah Miller.
Yes,
Yeah, because
yes, Hannah Miller,
she was
Pastor
Sam
Miller's
in
daughter.
the
Yeah,
yeah Pastor Miller's daughter. Exactly. Yeah,
yes,
that's what it was. But yeah, isn't yeah you're right.
yes.
Sees her them being
Sees them like,
evil.
yeah, sees them like, you um you know going off together, and then like, I don't think they get very far, but maybe they kiss a little. But he sees them, and he uh witnesses them being evil. um and so then it something starts happening in the like the day after, where things start going wrong in the village. That
Yes,
all
that's
all
what
the
it
food
is.
is now starting to go bad. And so the preacher is now, or the pastor is now, like, so everybody's thinking things are going bad. And then the pastor has now gathered all the children in in the church, and they go to, everybody tries to figure out what the hell's going on because it's weird, and they break into it. They get in there, and the pastors killed all the children by taking all their eyes, and is
Mm-hmm.
also carved out his own eyes. And so, everybody's like, oh, it must be witches, witches,
Yeah.
somebody must be doing something. And then of course the guy goes, oh, it's Sarah Fear and Hannah Miller, because they were out cavorting and doing all this. And then everybody just mass hysteria, like bullshit,
Yeah.
just plays into
Turns
it.
into a proper witch hunt. And I really like how, again, coming back to it, as much as I despise the accents in this part, I
Yes.
do really enjoy how accurate this part feels to like what witch hunts were, which was
Right.
basically most of the time it was like queer women that were being targeted by the
Right.
Puritans
Somebody
who.
different. Yeah.
Exactly. That's what these witch trials were. It was like difference was being punished, and a lot of the time it was queer women, like lesbians, and that were being targeted just because of the fact that they didn't like men and they
Right.
didn't want. So that's why a lot of those like historical actual witch hunt victims were. So I like how this film really taps into that and kind of is showing how ridiculous witch hunts are. Like it's
Right.
definitely not on the side of the people who are having the witch hunt. It's showing
Right.
them as being the, I guess, ones who are in the wrong.
Right. So yeah. So Sarah and Hannah run away. Hannah ends up getting caught, but Sarah ends up going to Solomon Good's house and hiding there. And while hiding there, she manages to get underneath it, and underneath there is the altar. And she
Mm-hmm.
discovers that Solomon Good is the guy who has made the deal with the devil,
Yes.
and he's the cause of everything. And so he pulls her out, and like once he knows she's discovered his secret and everything, he pulls her out, says, oh, I found the witch and everything. And they end up chaining her up and hanging her up, and she curses him that she's going to follow him through time, all of his
Mm-hmm.
descendants and everything, and she will make them pay, and so that's where it really comes down to, is that because she made that curse, and people heard it, and all that, that through time, now through Solomon Good's line and everything, they just keep up this charade that every killing and everything else like that is related to the curse of Sarah Fear.
Mm-hmm.
And meanwhile, the Good family has been doing all this to the people of Shadyside all this time, and has been enriching themselves and everybody else in the Sunnyvale area. And so it's this whole thing where you think that it just, again, it kind of goes into the whole, like, there's something, if it's too good to be true, it is. So
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And like that's the one thing though about like the I guess the main narrative of the entire kind of trilogy that is something that I always just kind of like leaves me a little bit like, oh, really again? But it's the whole thing of
yeah.
like, it's showing that like the evil was, you know, someone making a deal with the devil, like so it was Satan, it
Right.
was like the devil, which was what was the source of evil.
Rather than
That
the fact that it was them just themselves being evil. Fuck, their
exactly.
whole family
And
line was just evil.
100%,
Yeah.
but also as well, like it's just because like obviously then it's taking this, I guess, if you want to think about it, this kind of moralistic or Christian type perspective of Satan and the devil is evil and use of it is evil. So kind of like, I guess leaning into that whole kind of like, satanic panic and that type of thing.
Right.
And it's something that I always just find a bit like, oh, really? Are we really still doing that trope? Like,
Yeah.
because like in the real, like actual in the real world, like, there are like practicing like, Satanists and stuff like that. And if anything, real, genuine, practicing Satanists are like punk rock people, and they're queer
Yeah,
people, and they're people who just like do everything that the Christian religion should but doesn't. And it's kind
right,
of, it's really, I always find it a little bit frustrating when you see a film like, a horror film that once again kind of goes down that route of portraying Satanism and the devil as evil. And it's just like, oh, they could have like done something so much more interesting. Like if like they could have had the entire same plot line of like the good family, are using this like supernatural power to, keep themselves like benefiting. Every
right.
16 years they sacrifice someone from shady side, and that's why everyone in Sunnyvale like benefits. But it could have been
Yeah,
something like, you could have gone like some weird type of like Lovecraftian monster. There could have been so many
yeah,
ways to do
yeah.
it without it having to just
Delving into
go,
satanic
yeah,
panic shit. Yeah,
exactly, go back to something that's been done before. And yeah, that's my only kind of like personal gripe with, I guess, the
yeah,
narrative of the trilogy. But other than that, I think what they do is really well, and that I really like how the third film reveals that it was, at the end of the day, kind of a, you know a strong kind of feminist, like good for her revenge film, in that
right.
Sarah
Yeah,
Fear has been trying to get revenge all this time and has now
right.
finally been able to be laid to rest because of what happened to her. And yeah, so that was my only gripe. That really Satanists again? Oh, of course.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, like yeah, I think it would have been more interesting if you had done like some kind of elder god type thing, like definitely put it in some other context that definitely didn't need to be there. Um the Christian aspect of it didn't need to be there. But you know, otherwise, yeah, I agree with you. I think that the good for her aspect of it, the fact that she was seeking revenge against the good family this whole time, that was her sole thing. And realistically, I mean, she wasn't really doing much of any of that. She just, because none of this was due to her. All these killings were because of the goods and because they were, you know, doing all of that. So
Exactly.
realistically, Sarah Fear had nothing to do with any part of this. Reuniting her with her hand had nothing to do with it other than giving the whoever did it the memories enough to figure it out. And that was
100%.
the sole reason for doing that.
Exactly. And also, it just shows that, what happens at the start of part one, like the reason that like, Sam is being hunted by those like possessed killers, or the brought back to life undead killers, is because of the fact that obviously she has been touched by Sarah Fear, so has the potential to figure out the truth. So that's why
Right.
she's been targeted. So when you realize the nuance of how everything is connected through the trilogy, there's so much going on that's really well done.
Right.
And watching the three in a row, like, I think it adds the strength to each film because you see how interconnected they are. So yeah, like
Right.
overall though, I think as a trilogy, it's very solid. Like
Oh
it's a very
yeah,
solid trilogy.
definitely.
Like none of them like, are bad or weak films. Like my
No.
personal gripes with part three are just like little things like about accents
Yeah,
and stuff like
exactly.
that. But other than that, like I think overall it's done well. And I like that moment when you see the real Sarah Fear telling,
Yes.
telling her like story, or telling the curse, and like, she's obviously now, you get to see her as how she actually was. I liked that touch because I remember at first when you're first watching 1666 and you don't realize really what's happening, you're just like, wait, why are they all the same? This is really weird. And then you just turn out, oh
Right.
no, that was just how she was being told the story was, so
Right.
it's
Exactly.
realistically, all those actual characters that you're seeing, they didn't actually look like that. That was just
Yeah, yeah,
clearly,
exactly.
that was Dina being, through like Sarah filling it out with her brain or whatever. So yeah, I thought that
Right.
was an interesting touch. Um
Yeah, definitely.
and the way that Nick Good gets, his comeuppance by having like all the
Yes.
kind of blood poured on him, and the killers then end up just targeting him. Yes, oh, it's done beautifully. But also just a little throwback to part one. But I just love the moment in part one where what is the he's like the janitor in the grocery mall, and
Yeah.
like he's been put into the jail because like of like using tags, but it's just a bit where like Sheriff Good like leaves him in the cell and walks away, and he just goes, Sheriff Good, more like Sheriff motherfucking evil. Like I
Yeah.
just love how it turns out that wait, that was actually the
It was
filmmaker
actually
telling
true.
it was
Yeah.
true. It was, that was
Yeah.
letting us know that this isn't just a pissed off man. That's actually a fun little. Oh yeah, no, if you pay attention, he's been the bad guy all along.
Yeah, yeah. No, and I like that about that. It comes full circle and kind of like clues you into some of the like little things that you might have missed and everything that, kind of pointed out. Oh yeah, no, Nick Good was actually pretty bad to begin with. So yeah, this is a, wrapping this all up. This
Yeah.
is a, a fun trilogy that I think is really cool about paying homage to the slasher eras of the, 70s, 80s and 90s, and and doing it in a fun contemporary way. Bringing us a lot of queer
Yes, and
characters
ultimately,
that you
like
wouldn't have gotten during those eras either. So it was nice
exactly,
to put them
and
in better
yeah, to
context.
100%. Because like the thing is, it's not like there wouldn't have been queer people in that era. There were queer people have been there since the start. So I
Yeah,
like how the film recontextualizes it, but also that's the one thing that we haven't really touched on that much. But the simple fact that as a trilogy, it's a trilogy that has like queer characters at the center of the
the
film,
very
and they
center of it all.
survive.
Yeah.
Like they survive. Like
Yes.
it's not just, and also they're queer characters that just happen to be queer, so it's not a film that's about their queerness or anything like that. They're
No.
just happen to be queer people who are involved in this fucked up situation, and they
Right.
survive. Like most horrors, like if you think about like a lot of times, like obviously teen horrors in the 90s, and then we lean into more of the early 2000s. That's when you got to see more and more queer representation on screen, but a lot of time they were side characters, and they were usually the ones that get killed off pretty quickly. There's very few queer characters that survive in horror, so having queer characters that are the main characters and also survive is a pretty nice turn of events. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's
definitely.
like, and so this strong underlying kind of like feminist revenge story with queer characters as main characters, I'm not going to complain about any of that. I think it does it well.
Right. No, and like I enjoy that. Like, obviously, I've everybody knows that I'm a straight man and everything like that. But I think that, you can watch this and enjoy it for what it is and enjoy the characters
Mm-hmm.
and everything, that it's not preachy, it's not trying to hit you over the head with any kind of message about it. It's
Exactly.
just about love, and it's about saving the people you love. And that's ultimately like you could like that's the thing about this, and that's what I love about a movie like this, is that you can, or a series like this, is that you can put queer people into this and still have the same experience as being a straight person. Like, I'm sorry, but we've already seen tons of movies with straight characters that, that is literally the same thing. You could have put straight characters in this and made it the same way. But
100%.
it wouldn't have had, I think, the same impact as it does without the queer characters. And I think
100
having the queer characters in it
exactly.
makes it so much better, and much more has more depth to it than it would normally. It'd be a lot more
100%.
surface.
Exactly. And I think as well, having, queer characters through it as the kind of core of this film, it's what also really contextualizes and has impact
Right.
of the 1666 sequence of like witch trials. Like again, coming back to what we were saying earlier, queer people were the targets of so many witch trials. So
Right.
having queer characters being the heart of this overall story really hits home that type of narrative. So yeah, there's
Right.
lots going on, and you know, like as an aside, as queer people, we have to watch most films that have straight characters, and we're
Yeah.
easily we're able to relate to it by going, oh, hey, these are just humans in a situation. So if straight people can't relate to a story with queer characters,
Right.
really? I don't believe you. I don't believe
Right.
you. But
No,
yes,
no, I mean, yeah. It's just like, look, there are decidedly very queer movies that I probably won't watch because it's not something I would be interested in necessarily, but I have watched stuff that is like that, that is like um that I can relate to. You know what I mean? It's like watching a predominantly black movie. Like there's things in all of these movies that are going to be different, yes, but they're going to still be at its core. They're going to be about humans dealing with humans. And when it comes
exactly.
down to it, you can like you can put yourself into those places and enjoy those movies just as much. And so, it's I don't anybody who says, well, I'm not going to watch that because of that reason or whatever, because there's queer people in it, then you're just missing out. It's just you're missing out on a good movie that you could enjoy if you just, put your own self aside for a minute. So
Exactly. And like ultimately, if if all of our movies and stories were from the exact same perspective all of the time, it would
oh,
get
they'd be so
boring pretty
boring.
quickly. Like so
Yeah.
having different perspectives, having different voices is exciting. So that's why I'm just super excited to see, I'd love to see more of these type of Fear Street style films. Like, I think the concept of what Netflix did with these films is really interesting of getting a filmmaker to tell a story set during a certain era of horror, like paying homage to that era while also telling its own unique story from that filmmaker's perspective. That's really cool. Like I'd love to see more young filmmakers of different, backgrounds doing something similar, like,
Right.
paying homage to a certain genre of horror by telling their own unique story from their own perspective. So yeah, I think if Netflix doesn't like capitalize on this again and tell more Fear Street stories or Fear Street style stories of just simply like, hey, we're gonna get this filmmaker to tell a 1970s set horror film, but from their own unique kind of modern perspective. Yeah, there it could be really interesting. But yeah, overall, Fear Street Trilogy, highly recommend. I think everyone should watch
Oh,
it.
absolutely. Yeah, no, and that's the other thing too, is that this series of movies was directed by a woman. And
Yes.
it was fairly successful, at least in terms of um the social media awareness of it. Like literally
Mm-hmm.
everybody was talking about it on my timeline when it came out. So to me, that seems like it's a very positive thing. And hopefully it did well in terms of viewers. I mean, unfortunately, we never know with Netflix or any of these streamers, they never release viewership numbers. So we can only hope that it did well. But it's great that a woman had the opportunity to make these movies, and and I will continue to champion that. Right now, we literally have the Barbie movie, which made over $1 billion now,
Mm-hmm.
which is fantastic. It's the movie that's made the most money for Warner Brothers ever. So if that and they're taking like everybody's taking the like some
Oh yeah,
I think
they're
Warner
gonna.
Brothers is taking the wrong tack on that and going, oh, we need to make more movies about toys. No,
It's like
you need to
no,
make more women centric movies.
yeah,
Like
or just in general, like instead of it being, oh hey, we're gonna make an entire now universe about different toy films. It's like no,
yeah,
that's not the message. The message
that
is
was
just
not the message
like let
remotely.
filmmakers tell stories in their own unique voices.
Yes,
Let
yes.
more women filmmakers tell their stories. Let more queer, so whatever it is, like just trust a filmmaker to tell a story in their own way.
Let
Like
people be creative.
exactly. Like and just the simple fact that like again, little tiny tangent, but Greta Gerwig, Barbie is super successful and it's happened. But like when you compare it to, like Christopher Nolan is a super successful film director, but it's
Yeah,
also he's a white man who's been able to
yeah,
trust to be told like to just to direct whatever way he wants every time. Like,
right.
there hasn't been any massive studio intervention. Whereas like,
No,
most filmmakers that are minority backgrounds of some way, so women or black director, whatever, a lot of the time they're not as trusted to be able to just
no,
tell their vision. Like, because a lot of time auteur theory or directors are not viewed as visionaries if they're not a straight white man. So it's just
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
yeah. But yes, I really hope we get more Fear Street or Fear Street style films because they were fun. We need more
yeah.
and I think if you think about it in a way, the Fear Street films kind of were like the first kind of like starting of like just more kind of fun horror films. Like, when we got like the Fear Street films came out when they did, and then not that long after that we had like Malignant, and then now we got Megan, and we're getting
Right.
more just fun horror films that like, they don't pull away from being
Kind of getting
gory
away
or
from the
violent.
elevated, the quote
Yes.
unquote
Oh
elevated,
God. I
only
hate
the
that
elevated,
term.
because I hate it too. Like, but getting away from that, like using uh it's not elevated, but it's using like what is it called?
Like
Like
grief or trauma
grief and
centric
yeah, grief and
stories.
trauma. Yes, exactly. Trauma was what I was thinking of. But yeah, getting away from trauma stuff. Not that that can't be done well, because Talk to Me was a really good movie. And that's centered around grief and stuff. And so it's, not to spoil anything, but it's, getting away from that solely is really good. We need more fun, more exciting. Like the two newest Scream movies, whether you like them or not, they're still having fun with the franchise. And so
Exactly.
that's the main thing to take away from all of this is let's keep having fun with horror movies. That's what they're ultimately supposed to be. We can still have the ones that are more like quote unquote, important, or delve into the deeper things and stuff like that. That's okay. I like
Yeah,
those
we
too,
just we just
but
want
let's have a
variety. That's what
diversity.
we
Yeah,
want. Like a variety of
exactly.
all two different types of horror films rather than, which is like again, it's the way the studio system works in that it's like you'll get like a film like Hereditary that does really, it's a very
Yeah,
fantastic film. It does really well, but then it means studios go, oh, this is what is doing well. We need to greenlight more projects like this, which means you get more of those kind of slow burn style trauma centric films, which yes, they're fine, but we want more variety. So
right.
horror fans don't just want one type of thing. Give us it all. Like we want it all. Like we want the buffet
Right.
of horror.
And I think we're getting that now. Like I think the studios are finally
Yeah.
starting to realize a little bit, hopefully we get out of this, mess of these uh what's it called? Um these strikes. But once we get out of these
Yes.
strikes, hopefully we get towards a an aspect where we're getting more fun stuff again.
Hmm. Definitely. I'm looking forward to getting more things as they get released. But yes, I also at the same time though, similarly, I do not care how long the strikes take place.
Oh
Once
yes,
they, the writers and everything get and what they deserve, because they do deserve it. One interesting thing I
absolutely.
saw today, though, which hopefully it might change a lot of the studio's tact, was there was a US federal judge who made a ruling that AI created art
Yes.
can't be copyrighted, which means
Yeah.
that I think a lot of studios are going to pause now because obviously they were trying to go towards, oh, we can do more AI stuff, which means we don't have to pay people. But if you can't
Right.
copyright it, well, then, hey, that means anyone can use it. And studios,
Right.
we know how much they like their copyright. So,
Right.
so that might change their tact a bit. So we'll see. We shall
Let's
see.
hope so.
Let's
Yeah.
hope so. But yes, to, yeah.
Well, yeah. So, just wrapping this up, where can people find you online?
Perfect. Yes. So I am Mix Bel Morrigan. So that's MXBELMORRIGAN. I'm on all the socials. So Twitter, Instagram. I'm even on Blue Sky now. So you can
Okay.
find me on all of those places. And then in all of them, I have my link tree. So you can find, once you're on my link tree, that will bring you to my podcast sites and also any of my like my sex work related stuff too. So yeah, if you want to find me anywhere, you can find me through my socials, and that will lead you towards the rabbit hole of the rest of the stuff I do.
All right.
Perfect,
Well,
amazing.
thank you again for coming on. I very much appreciate it. Always love having you on.
It was an absolute blast. We went on a few tangents today, but they were
We
fun.
always
And
do on my show.
we that's true. But no, this was great fun, and I thank you for giving me the chance to talk about these fun films because more
Yeah,
people
of
should talk
course.
about them because they're good films.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, hopefully this will get a little bit more of the conversation started again.
Perfect. But no, thank you for having me on. It's an absolute
Yeah.
pleasure again.
Thanks again to Belle for joining me. On Friday, Iona Smith returns to the show to talk about Guardians of the Galaxy, and on Monday, Angel Krause returns to the show to talk about the Blair Witch trilogy. Thanks for listening. Creepy and Geeky is a part of the Morbidly Beautiful podcast network. Please check out morbidlybeautiful.com/podcasts for more great shows. If you like what you've heard, please consider giving the show 5 stars and a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Also, please share the podcast on social media to help spread the word. Make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app or at creepyandgeeky.com. Music for the podcast is Gratitude, composed by Jerry Smith. You can follow the podcast on social media at Creepy and Geeky on both Twitter and Instagram. If you'd like to follow me, I'm Geek Thulu on Twitter and Blue Sky, and geek.thulu on Instagram. You can support the podcast by ordering teas and more on TeePublic or by donating to the coffee page. All of the links are in the show notes. Finally, don't forget, stay creepy.